In this video, we're going to review the proper procedures for petty cash in QuickBooks. The first step would be to set up your petty cash account by clicking on Accounting, Chart of Accounts. If you haven't ever clicked there before or haven't done so in a while, you might see this screen. Just click See Your Chart of Accounts and you'll be taken to the listing of accounts. If you don't know, this is the list of every single account in QuickBooks that you can select from when categorizing transactions. We want to set up the petty cash account as a bank account, even though it's not a real bank account where you're going to be getting bank statements. But for things to work in QuickBooks and for it to show up on the right location in your reports, it needs to be set up as a bank. To do that, we'll click up in the top right corner where it says New. On this screen, the most important choice you have to make is with account type. The account type that you select determines where on your reports this account will live. Will it be on the balance sheet? Will it be on the profit and loss statement? In this case, we want it to be an asset on the balance sheet, so we'll pick bank for the account type. The detail type matters less. It does affect some things. In this instance, it's not super important. We can leave it on the cash on hand default, which is actually correct anyways in this instance. And then the name, you can leave it as cash on hand, or you can rename it as petty cash if you want to. When you're done, hit the green button, save and close. You now see your new account here in the second row on the list with a $0 balance, which brings us to step number 2. We need to fund the account. To do that, typically you would write a check to cash and have your bank cash that check. So let's say that we've done that process, and or we need to print the check out from QuickBooks to take it to the bank. In either way, we would come up to the plus new menu in the top left, click on that, and then click check under the vendor column. This pulls up a check that we can record after the fact if we maybe hand wrote the check that we took to the bank, or if we need to print the check, we do have that option down here on the bottom in the black bar that says print check. The payee in this case would just be cash. If you need to add a new payee, you can do that on the fly here. Just start typing cash, click on add new account. We want this to be a vendor. You always want to pick a vendor when money is going out. Customers are only for incoming money, so even though this isn't a real person, we're going to make them a vendor in this case. So if we did print this check, cash would show on the appropriate line. For category, this is normally where we would pick office supplies or rent or whatever the type of expense we're paying is. In this case, though, we want to use this transaction to increase our petty cash account. And what QuickBooks does behind the scenes is any account that you put in this category box will be debited, which in the case of putting an asset account in this selected area will mean the account will be increased. So we're going to increase the petty cash account by, let's just make an example of $100. As usual, when writing a check, you want to make sure that it is being drawn upon the correct account. This is the account that will be credited or reduced in this case. So in this example, we'll just go with the checking account. And as I said, you can print check or just save this if you had previously handwritten the check. We'll just save and close. And now you see the petty cash account has been increased by $100. And in our register for this account, we have this deposit transaction. If we were to go look in the checking account, we would have a, quote, payment or expense transaction for the same amount. The next step will be to record expenses against the petty cash account, or the uses of the petty cash. To do that, we will go again to the plus new menu and click on expense this time. Let's say we have to reimburse an employee $5 that they personally spent to park somewhere. In the payee section, we could select someone that's already in the drop-down box, or we could enter someone new. Let's enter John. We'll make John a vendor and hit save. Now, instead of having this expense drawn on the checking account, we want to have it drawn on the petty cash account, which is now in this drop-down box. So we'll change this option to petty cash. This would be the date of the transaction. The category now would be whatever was actually purchased. So in this case, maybe you would call it travel. You could put a description if you wish, and the amount of the transaction. If there was a receipt that John brought you from the parking garage, you could attach it to this transaction here in the lower left corner. One other best practice that I will mention for petty cash is to use this reference number and use them sequentially. So if this is the very first transaction, this would be receipt number 1, and then you'd go to 2 and 3. If you purchase one of those little cash receipt booklets and have the employee sign off on having received their reimbursement, you can put the number that is pre-printed on that receipt booklet here in the reference number section as well. From this screen, if we have no more details to add, we can save and close and see what this did to our petty cash register. So here we see that we deposited 100 as the opening balance, and then we reduced it by an actual expense that we incurred, and we're keeping a running total of our account balance. At all times in your petty cash box or in your safe, you should have $100, whatever your initial deposit was, you should have $100 in either real money or receipts. So your real money plus your receipts should equal back to your initial amount. So in this case, we have $95 of real cash, which we should verify on a periodic basis by physically counting the cash in the safe. And we have $5 in receipts. So 95 plus 5 obviously is 100, and this account then would be considered reconciled. We would certainly want to do this before we replenish money into the account, but if that's part of your month-end close procedure, even if you're not replenishing the cash account, this would be something good to get in the habit of doing. When you are doing that reconciliation, you can actually do it in QuickBooks and not just mentally go through it like we just did. So you would come to your register here, or if you're elsewhere in QuickBooks, you could go to the gear icon and then click on Reconcile and select the petty cash account that way. But since we're here, we'll just click Reconcile. If you've never done this before, you might get this screen. Just click Get Started. Let's do it. Go through these pop-ups until you get here. Now you don't have a statement to grab, but we want to make sure that our petty cash account is selected here. Since this is the first time we're doing this, the beginning balance obviously was 0 before this account was even created. The ending balance, though, is always going to be equal to the actual physical cash that you have. So in this case, we have $95 of real cash. I'll just make this today's date and we'll start reconciling. You'll only get those pop-ups if it's your first time through the software, and since I'm in a sample company, I'm getting all those pop-ups. But At this point, you would want to compare the receipts that you have to the screen. So we would have a receipt from the bank because we withdrew money. We'd have our maybe a check copy. We'd have the little receipt from the teller stand. So we would be looking at that and we would check off this 100. And then we would have the receipt from John from the parking garage and his signature on the receipt that he received his reimbursement. So looking at those two documents, we would then check that item off. And we would be at the $0 difference, which is always the goal of reconciling in QuickBooks. And we'd be done at this point. So we could click Finish Now and continue then adding more expenses, or if now we decided we always need to have $100 in the account, we could then go and write another check to cash to increase our balance again. And all of this is maintained in the register here in QuickBooks, and we can see that these two transactions have been reconciled by the R logo that is in this checkmark column. If you have any questions about how to use petty cash for your business, how to set it up in QuickBooks, or what other best practices you might implement, feel free to reach out online at swedaconsulting.com or on Facebook, also on Twitter, and by email, of course. Thanks for watching.